There's no leading edge transient to it at all. And all of a sudden this cymbal is just shimmering in air. It was fantastic.
I hope you enjoyed that little tease, and welcome to Pursuit of Perfect System and one of my videos as a coverage for the Bristol Hi-Fi Show 2020. This video is one of two in the REL Acoustics room, and in part one I interview John Hunter, who is owner and lead designer, and he tells us lots of interesting and useful things. But before we get into that, I need to thank my video sponsors: Isotech Systems, GIK Acoustics, ISO Acoustics. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, hit the thumbs up button. If you'd like to see more videos like this, there's a hell of a lot more videos in my YouTube channel, including other Bristol Hi-Fi Show 2020 videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Well, first of all, John, thanks so much for seeing me after the show. Really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You obviously just sat through another customer of yours demo. Really, really impressive demo. That's probably the most impressive musical bass demo in a show in a very, very small room situation I think I've ever experienced that going to shows
Thank you
all over the world. That's really, really impressive.
Thank you.
So that's a little tease for a bit that might come in the video. But obviously, in terms of a question, why is bass or why is a REL important for a hi-fi system?
So it's a great question, and audiophiles get this wrong all the time. I was just cautioning our staff last night, don't begin a conversation with a would-be customer or dealer by talking about subwoofers. Find out what it is they're into. And most audiophiles are actually petrified of the word subwoofer. I personally think that most of them are awful and have been for 35, 40 years. So the things that distinguish really profoundly good sub-bass systems, and I'd like to include REL in that, it requires understanding music, first of all. In our experience, coming off the amplifiers is extremely important as opposed to coming off a preamp level source, because if you ignore the interconnects and the power amplifier signatures, you're ignoring half the chain of custody. It's extremely important to have deep bass because everything we experience in real life is full range. And if you can get off of the thought of bass, because as I said, a lot of audiophiles are most concerned about overbearing bass. And what they don't realize is in order to have your system sound correct, just natural, not even correct, just natural, everything we experience in life is full bandwidth. Whether it's high in amplitude, loud, or soft, if you take a simple acoustic recording, a single 6-string steel guitar being played and nothing else in a small studio, and you listen to it with and without the REL, if you remove the REL from it, you'll all of a sudden hear everything in the soundstage shrink, and the guitar loses about $30,000 of value. I've done this dem, so I'm not speaking, as a theoretical component. I've heard an absolute brilliant guitarist, close mic by the way. We're talking about a large diaphragm mic right here with the sound hole right here. You can hear all the fingering, you can hear all the intimacy, you hear the body of this guitar, and you take the REL out of it, and all of a sudden it shrinks down to a $400 factory-built guitar out of Korea. You're going, oh my God, what just happened? A guitar definitionally can't produce bass. It doesn't go down that low. So what are we hearing? We're hearing things like the back of the guitar moving up against the chest of the man who's playing it. You're hearing things like the air conditioning compressor that's on in the building generating 3-4 hertz tones through the fresh air ducts. None of us sit there and go, oh my gosh, I think I can hear 3 hertz out of that. It's there though, and it's present, and it's recorded on the music. And when you take those cues out, you lose all of the sense of space. If you care about imaging, if you care about intimacy, if you care about correct scale, if you care about voices and correct vocal inflection, you absolutely need a first-rate subwoofer. It's that simple.
In terms of this Serie-S range of subwoofers from REL, REL been making subs, what is it, 30 years or 40 years? Or
this is our 30th year.
30 years.
That's
so
right.
There's been a lot of ranges, isn't there, in those 30 years. What makes this Serie-S range better than the ranges that have gone before?
Sure. So first of all, let's define where Serie-S lies. It is for REL in the midst of our range. There is a full range of products, 4 models below it in the classic range, if you will. And then above it, we have our 212s, we have the G1 Mark II, and the number 25s. These are all reference grade products. The significance of S, and it's really interesting, my chief engineer Justin figured this out long before I did. He said the problem with our mid-level products is that it's quite an expensive purchase for the person who's doing it. They're not a reference customer looking to save money and move down. They'd really like to be told they only need one from our entry-level TI range, and when they start being told that your speakers, your system demands the next level up, their expectation isn't of a mid-range product that's pretty good and does a lot of things well. They're really coming at it from the perspective of their expectations. They need a reference or near reference experience to justify it. So what did we do differently from the previous S's? Really simple stuff and really complex stuff. The driver was really very close to faultless, but I could hear a certain signature in the old one, and there was a phenomenon going on that I could detect early on. We in fact built a test driver back 3 or 4 years ago that proved the concept for it, but it was not producible. It was enormously time consuming to put together. But what occurred with the last generation, very lightweight aluminium skin, the cone itself, and the ingoing back pressure wave would hit and revert back through the cone. Now, a lightweight aluminium cone is relatively transparent to bass frequencies, so it would go right through and produce a certain amount of cancellation of the wave you just produced going forward. Not great. So what we developed on the back is a network of carbon fiber blades. Everything we did weighs, by the way, less than 1 sheet of paper's weight. Incredibly lightweight. And if you can imagine, their fingers, we didn't cover the entire back of the thing. Most people just go, right, we figured this out, just coat the whole thing. It doesn't sound right. You still have to listen to it and tune it. So it's a series of 5 carbon fiber blades on the back, each about that wide, that damp about half of the surface of the back of the aluminium, and it just cuts out all that reversion completely. And all of a sudden, I told Rob shortly after we tested, oh my God, we did this, and instantly the driver, even in the old S cabinets, even using the original amplifiers, we had about a 50% improvement in performance. Now you start asking yourself, how do we get better? So a complete redesign of the cabinets. The dimensions actually support deeper bass better. The bracing has always been incredible on RELs. Part of a misbegotten youth. I spent a summer 1 year working in a musical instrument shop, had a luthier teach me what he was doing and how he did bracing, and it stayed with me ever since. So we really tune exactly like musical instrument builders do, and it really makes RELs very quick and very quiet. The last thing we did was greatly increase the amount of amplifier power, not because we wanted these things to play just obscenely loud. We needed it because we knew there was more to be gotten out of the drivers and just pure performance, pure acoustic performance. So we developed a filter that we euphemistically refer to as the perfect filter. What it does is it produces a very gentle extensional addition at the very bottom. So if you listen to and measure an old S5 versus a current S812, we're about 12 dB flatter than the old S5 on the new 812. Incredibly flat, very, very good output down to 20 and below. We've never been able to offer that kind of extensional performance. And on the other end of the scale, RELs are really famous for making a perfect seamless junction with the main speaker. These will do it better than anything at this price or below we've ever produced. And we changed the filter topology and made it shallower at the top end. So the way that the REL relates to the main speaker is gentler and more open. And the minute we did it, like literally it was 10 seconds of listening with Justin, and we just both looked at each other and, oh my God, it wasn't the bass. We weren't listening to bass at all. In fact, we were listening to one of the cuts you just played, and it starts with a drawn drumstick across the edge of a cymbal. So it's just a shh. There's no leading edge transient to it at all. And all of a sudden this cymbal is just shimmering in air. It was fantastic. So the perfect filter addresses both ends. And when you hear the net result of those things, the 510, for example, goes from 400 watts to over 500. The 812 goes from 500 watts to 1,000 watt amplifier that's actually just limited down to 800. On demand, it will actually use the full 1,000, but it's capable of about 800 watts continuous. The driver was tested at 700 watts continuous output for 23 hours and 52 minutes. And we said, you know what, that's close enough to 24 hours. We'll let that slide.
Quick question, in terms of recommendations, because you've got a HT range, haven't you, a home theatre range?
We do.
So if someone's a mixed user, i.e. their system's used for home cinema, but also they want good music, what subwoofer should they buy?
Great question, and it could be an immensely long answer. I'll try and simplify it. Our guidance is to have something appropriate as a main sub for your main speakers. All right, something with a high level connection. If you've got good electronics and things, let's make use of it, right? So I would generally guide you to have the anchor sub, if you will, do that. I don't know if you're familiar with our work, but we advocate what's called REL 3D, and it's really no mumbo jumbo. It's really quite simple. What we want is full range out of all the main speakers. That includes the surrounds, by the way. If you've heard what a REL can do for the main speaker, blended perfectly and all that, and you take out the high level, the whole thing falls apart, the entire system. That's true in theater. I would say it's almost more true for theater than it is for music, because there is so much spectacularly low bass in it that has to be reproduced. But the significance is that if you understand that let's just start with 5.1. You can take this argument to the 7s and the 9s and the 11s, that's fine. But if you understand how theater is supposed to be produced, all 5 of those main speakers are all supposed to be flat into the 20s. If you read the original Dolby white paper, it actually calls for dead flat to 20 hertz. And I believe it was 105 dB average. And they're using A weighting, which is the most conservative. It's what we use for all of our measurements. If you were to use modern day, like subwoofer C weighted rating, we're talking about 120, 125 dB peaks. So that's an extremely loud output of incredibly low bass. And what you need is to be able to get that spaciousness that comes from having it all around you, not just coming from one woofer parked in a corner or somewhere along a sidewall or behind you. It has to be a wrap around, or none of the actual steering that everybody's worked so hard in Hollywood to get actually comes through. You wind up going, right, that's extremely loud bass, rather than going, oh my gosh, that 747 just went through and over my head. It's a completely different reality experience. We recommend having at least one of the HTs in there purely for the 0.1s. They do the best job for the least money of anything we know. And then you need a center channel sub. So if you weight really heavily towards theater, my guidance would be this. You're going to need a center channel subwoofer from the classic range, a T5, a T7, a 510, whatever your speaker setup is. You want that center channel to be high level and full range, right? What that does is it gives you a lot of the dialogue and the intimacy and the warmth that's not present in most systems that do theater. And then you're going to want to do, depending on the size of the room and your expectations, you may want a 1508 as your main and a 1003 in the rear to support the surrounds. And that will give you the biggest bang for the buck, right? If you're 80%, 70% dominant music and you still want great experiences in theater, you're going to want to invert that relationship. So you'd have a classic range, let's say a T9 or an 812 as your main left-right support. Stereo pairs if the budget permits. Another classic tucked in high level, by the way, is just a little kind of quick tip to your viewers. The easy way to do it is to actually connect up directly to the back of the speaker terminal, so you don't have to run 30 feet of cable back to your stack of electronics. And then one really powerful piece, probably in the back for the pure 0.1.
At what point would you recommend that someone goes from maybe a single or a dual subwoofer setup up to something like this, which is pretty impressive, but would you, obviously I'm sure everyone would like to do it straight away, but at what point is it go from one, let me ask a better question. So, say for example, someone's got 2 subwoofers.
Yeah.
What about another 2, or
Sure.
should they go straight to 6? Kind of how does that work?
Can I answer the full question? Because
Yeah.
you're on it, right?
Okay.
Really, there are 2 steps to this. There are actually secondary steps. So let's start with why 2 instead of 1, right? This isn't simply a play to, oh, well, let's sell people twice as many subwoofers. What occurs when you have very fast woofers is that it opens up the sound stage profoundly. Rob's been doing a lot of this lately and listening to a lot of this. We've been doing it in the US. I don't know what percentage we're at, but it's well over 30% of our orders these days in the US are stereo pairs. And it's because what it does is, purely for music, let's start with that, because all of those benefits attached to theater instantly like that. It immediately opens up the spatial qualities and the transparency. So it's not about more bass, it's really about more space, more delicacy, more transparency. You see farther into a stage. How does that work with theater? Well, not to mistake the obvious, but theater is definitionally a rectangular soundstage. And so what typically happens with a good system is you've got pretty good foreground clarity and good local specification. If it's but let's say it's a rock band, here's the front man, right? Here's the lead guitar. You hear all that up front. Any of the stuff that gets further back on the outer edges of the stage is nowhere near that clear and articulate. It's just the reality of it. When you do stereo pairs, it really opens up. So you have this sort of V-shaped stage normally. All of a sudden, you've got the outer 2/3 of the stage that open up. Fine. So now we've gone and we've done a stereo pair. If you're fortunate enough to be able to do it right out of the gate, fantastic. Why then would you go from that to, and we're really talking about Serie-S's and above. This doesn't apply to the TIs. They're not even stackable. We'll probably never make them stackable, and that's not to preclude those people from playing at the party. There's just stuff you can't do in an affordable subwoofer that are really important. If you're going to go to that reference stacking level, you've got to be able to deliver it. So it's not just about playing louder, and I think you've heard those things. So the beauty of the reference line arrays for people who want to do it in stages is you now can. Nobody's holding a gun to your head saying, sorry mate, it's 12,000 pounds, you're either playing with the big boys or you're not. It's not the case. A pair of 510s, what do they run, Rob? Somewhere around 1,800 pounds at the moment? 1,900? You know, rounded off at 2,000s to make the math easy for my old brain, right? 2,000 pounds each, so 4,000 pounds. That's a considerable sum of money to begin with. If you know you're going to want to do this a year from now, another 4,000 pounds gets you the middle of the wedding cake, if you will. And finally, 2 years out, you can do this. So the beauty of it is it allows people to participate. I think one of the worst aspects of the high end is that too often it becomes exclusionary, and it feels really crappy if you're one of those people that doesn't have that money. And one of the beauties of this is it's a great leveler. First of all, if you listen to the system, a full-blown system as you just did, it's a complete category buster. It just changes your notion of what systems can do and at what price points. And then to be able to do it in 3 stages and have it be better at every point. At no point you go, oh gosh, I've only got a stereo pair of 510s or 812s, boy, I'm really feeling deprived. Sounds fantastic. And when you add the second ones, you'll start to get that lift in elevation, and the mid-bass concussion comes right out. All of a sudden you've got dynamics you've never heard. And when you can finally add that third layer, all of that sparkly, glinty stuff that just makes magic happen spatially occurs. So you just keep winning. It's not a big deal.
Perfect.
Hope that answers your question.
That's perfect, John.